No risk it, no biscuit.
Arizona Cardinals fans, do you see red? Are you part of the Red Sea? Then you are listening to the show for you, a podcast for Cardinals fans, by Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider perspectives. It's time to rise up and see red. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. This is episode 176. Yes, 176 episodes of this podcast since we started, what was it, I think 4 years ago in the 2013 season during the first year of Bruce Arians. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today sports media group site, the NFL Wire, part of the NFL Wire, covering the Arizona Cardinals. My co-host here with us tonight is Seth Cox, as always, from AvengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, and also the host of the NFL Draft Breakdown podcast. And Seth, team that we can do. So just as soon as we are about to bury them, we haven't buried them, but they got that terminal prognosis. They suddenly got some life to them. What is this?
Yeah, it was one of those games that you and I, for whatever reason, have been expecting, at least for the last 2 weeks, especially against the Houston Texans. Let's be completely honest about that. And I don't think we were wrong in our reaction. I just think that we didn't expect them to bounce back the way they did. Because, if you look at it now, not only did you beat a good Jaguars team, but you look at the Texans and how miserable they were on Monday Night Football last night.
How did they make Tom Savage look like a legit NFL starter?
Right, and so that's the thing. We're recording on Tuesday night. Last night, Monday Night Football game. You're like, this is a different team. There's no way this is the team the Cardinals gave up 31 points to the week before. And then we'll talk about this, but you and I were kind of texting about this. It's like, how did they win? And it's like, but if you really think about it, they tried really hard not to. They were up 16-3 with, I think it was 9 minutes to go in the third quarter. 16-3. That's a nice 2-score lead in the NFL. And they had to win on a last-second field goal. They tried their damnedest to give that game away again. And it just was a combination of Blake Bortles being bad, Doug Marrone making one of the most obscene calls I've seen a coach make, and then Blaine Gabbert and DJ Foster making plays to, it was kind of the perfect, and then Phil Dawson redeeming himself. It was all these things that you never expected to happen, all happened within the span of 5 minutes of real life time. Not even 5 minutes of game time. It was like 30 seconds of game time. It was like 5 minutes of real life time. And all of this happened, and you go, oh, okay.
And then the Cardinals win. They get the win 27-24 over the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had their first of 3 straight home games, kind of the stretch run. They were improved to 5-6, and kind of the talk of the town. If you're not worried about ASU football right now, the Arizona Cardinals, the talk of the town was Blaine Gabbert, who threw another couple of touchdown passes. Phil Dawson hits 4 field goals, a 57, a career long for the 19-year veteran. 57 yards, hits it with 1 second left. Really very, very, very entertaining game. The Cardinals get the win, 27-24. They move to 5-6, breathing just a little bit of life into the hopes. The hope's not dead. We didn't have to declare that we didn't get we're not calling time of death. That life continues to go on a little bit. And that's what we're going to talk about. So we've got several things we're going to talk about this game. what stood out in the win? There's plenty of things to talk about. We're going to talk about the offense. We're going to talk about Blaine Gabbert. We're going to talk about the fact that of who his targets were. We're talking about the defense, Chandler Jones and his performance, and Phil Dawson, because there were so many positives to take out of that game. We'll talk about concerns. We're going to talk about, well, what do we think about the Cardinals? I have a theory about just how this season is going to continue to go, and then we're going to go into the rematch that the Cardinals will have against the division-leading Los Angeles Rams, who, have lost a couple of games now since we've been talking about them. And that's what's coming up as we get started the show. But before we get started, I want to let you know again, remind you about our friends over at Harrys.com, where you get a great shave at a great price. I told you guys in the last few shows how I made the switch from the electric razor to the Harry's blades, and I've been super pleased with it. I'm shaving regularly with it and getting a perfectly smooth shave. I love it. My wife loves it. My kids love it. They think it's really cool when I shave. But we're getting to that holiday time of year, and when sometimes even for us guys, finding a gift for our other guy friends is not an easy thing to do, or someone finding a gift for us isn't it's not easy to do as well. And so Harry's is the perfect gift, whether you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it, having someone give it to you, or you want to give it to another guy that you know. They make amazing quality products for a super reasonable price. 3 million guys have already switched. It's practical. It's cool. You get to choose the color. You can personalize it. It comes with holiday colors. And so right now for the holidays, Harry's offering a custom limited edition of shaving sets that make perfect gifts. They're made with you in mind. They're made with your guy in mind. Got the German engineered blades. You've got a foaming shaved gel. Smells great. The handles right now during the holidays, they got winter chrome and emerald green, and you can even personalize it. So you got gift sets that start as low as $10, but we've got a special offer for you guys that are listening to the show. And so if you go to harrys.com/cred, you get an extra $5 off for the gift that you do. So for this holiday, give Harry's and give handsome. You like that? Give Harry's, give handsome. Get your holiday shopping done early and take advantage of free shipping. So to get a limited edition holiday shave set while supplies last, go to harrys.com/cred right now. That's harrys.com/cred. And let's go ahead and get started as we talk about what stood out for the game. We can't go any further without talking about Blaine Gabbert, can we? And Blaine Gabbert now is the talk of Phoenix. And if you want to look at this bizarro NFL world that we are in 2017, imagine going back 3 years to your 2014 self, and you were to tell yourself 3 years ago that at the back end in December of 2017, Colin Kaepernick wouldn't be able to find a job in the NFL, and both Blaine Gabbert and Geno Smith would be starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't think you would have believed you, and you would think that you were probably having problems and probably need to check yourself into some facility. But that's the NFL world that we're in. Blaine Gabbert is a starting quarterback for the Cardinals, but he hasn't been bad. After throwing 3 touchdown passes against the Houston Texans, he throws 2 more. 2 more touchdown passes against the Jacksonville Jaguars, accomplishing something. This is an interesting stat that the team kind of released as part of their Friday note cards and things that could happen. I had no idea how not good Gabbert had been in his career. This was only the second time in his career that he had consecutive games with more than 1 touchdown pass. And the first time he did it, it was in 2011, his rookie year. So 6 seasons, a gazillion games, a gazillion starts, and finally, as a member of the Cardinals, his third team, he finally has multiple touchdown passes in consecutive games. Was not perfect, but now Bruce Arians is even saying that if Palmer were to retire, he would be, quote, very, very comfortable if Blaine Gabbert were to start for them. What do we say about that?
Well, I wrote about it this week after that was kind of brought out, and I said this in the article. This is, if you read what Bruce Arians says, it's similar to what Bruce Arians has said before. And, in the article, it talks about how Bruce Arians, when he was talking about Drew Stanton and possibly starting in place of Carson Palmer, the words he used are the same. I'd be very confident. I'd be very comfortable. You go back to 2014, Cardinals Bruce Arians was and is confident with Drew Stanton. Confident in Stanton if it comes to that. That was in December of 2013. September of 2014, when the arm issues started for Palmer, the elbow impingement or whatever it was. Stanton hasn't thrown a pass in a regular season game since December of 2010. Arians very confident in him. So it's not surprising because that's Arians. And you and I have talked about this with him. He's just supremely confident. He believes in himself. He believes in what he's doing. And he believes that his evaluations are correct. And I think to that point, it bothers people when they don't see it a la Drew Stanton, and then they like it when they think they see it in Blaine Gabbert. So it's also one of those things. I mean, let's go back to 2013 and be completely honest. There were people that wanted to bench Carson Palmer for Drew Stanton. So
yes, I remember that about week 7 when they were 3-4. Yep.
Yeah. Let's not forget that in the NFL, the backup quarterback to anybody that's perceived to be not good at the quarterback position is everybody's favorite. And I think that's playing out here to a point, but also I just think it's Bruce Arians. He had a grade on Gabbert, obviously, in 2011, when Gabbert was drafted by the Jaguars, and he never really. This sounds disparaging, and I know it's not true, but it's almost like he doesn't know that Blaine Gabbert played 6 seasons in the NFL. It's almost like, okay,
they're given like the rookie year 1, year 2 look, like he's developing or something. Yeah,
right, and that's what I always say to people is like the way that he's talked about is so odd to me for a guy that's in his 7th year and started 42 games and has just won his 8th game.
Number 10. It was number 10. This was his 10th win.
So yeah, I mean 10th win in his 42nd start in the NFL. So it's not that he's playing great, because when you think of it in that terms, 42nd start in the NFL, 7 years in the NFL, you're like, okay, that's good backup stuff. But when you think about it from a young quarterback, and I think that's the way everybody's looking at this is, oh, this is a young quarterback. This is perfect. And it's like, is it? Like, I don't know. All I know is, for 2 weeks in a row, and honestly for 4 weeks in a row, Bruce Arians has done a hell of a job to get his offense in a position, let his defense and special teams win game. And in 2 of those games that happened, and 2 of those games it didn't happen. And, post Palmer, they're 2-2, and both backup quarterbacks are 1-1 now. And I think that just is a testament to Bruce Arians and the job he's done, and we have criticized, maybe not criticized the right word, but we have heard and talked about, is this Bruce Arians last year? Well, if it is, this might be its finest coaching moment, because you kind of look at where they have and what they have, and it's not necessarily good.
Right. And, I don't believe for a moment this is going to be his last year, especially the way he talks about Gabbert in particular. He's going to, you want to see what he can do his 2nd year in an offensive system, because literally every year he's been in a different one. Year 7, he's in his 7th offensive coordinator, 7th offensive system. There was a lot to like about Blaine Gabbert and his play. And what we saw again was a player who got off to a very, very effective start. In fact, the numbers were almost identical. He was 11 of 14 for, I think it was 120 yards in the first half against Houston, threw the 3 touchdowns. In the first half of the game against the Uh, Against the Jaguars, he was 11 of 14 for 109 yards and a touchdown. Very effective. But then you saw in the second half, you start to see some inaccuracy, whether it's adjustments, different reads, and then things got a little bit hairy in the fourth quarter. Against the Texans, he throws 2 fourth quarter interceptions. Against the Jaguars, he throws a bad interception, and he also is stripped there where you get that where that score happens with Calais Campbell. Overall, you have to what we're seeing, Gabbert he's not the abomination everyone thought he was. He is a quarterback that has talent, and it appears that he has a future on this team in some role or another. And it shows that the Cardinals can win with him. Now, between him and Drew Stanton, obviously, you know that Blaine Gabbert's ceiling is much higher. But now you're seeing kind of the same results. Cardinals were 1-1 with Stanton. The second of the loss with Stanton, where they should have won, had some guys stepped up around Stanton. You see the game against Houston, where, again, if it weren't for a blown assignment, maybe a call that Bruce Arians probably shouldn't make, a blown assignment, and defense not stepping up against what really should have been a bad offensive team. They get the loss there, and they do enough against Jacksonville to get the win. Blaine Gabbert is endearing himself to fans, and it just goes to show what Bruce Arians can do with the quarterback that has the traits that he looks for. He looks for a smart player with top-end athletic ability, like top-end abilities at the quarterback, whether it's big arm strength, which Gabbert has, some mobility, some accuracy, the ability to throw the ball, and to be able to make plays. And he can elevate that, and that's what he's done with Gabbert. And whether that means maybe he can be a starter. That could be one. It could be one of many things. Maybe he just hasn't finished developing. Maybe he is the long-term maybe he's the long-term solution at starter. We don't know that. I wouldn't bet on that. Maybe he's a bridge starter till they're drafted quarterback in you. Okay, that's a possibility. Maybe he's just going to be a backup. That's a possibility too. But even in any of those 3 scenarios, that's a good thing to get when you picked up Gabbert off the scrap heap.
Yeah, and it's what we talked about. If you put I think that's where, obviously, fans get a little off in terms of expectations. Every first round draft pick is an all pro. Every 5th round draft pick is a steal and going to become, a Pro Bowl player. And it's like, no, there are guys that are just roster fills. I mean, you have a 53-man roster, and you might, in a great season like the Philadelphia Eagles are having, you might have 10 guys that make the Pro Bowl. So maybe a 5th of your roster. So when you look at it from that perspective, and you look at it in the sense of, as you said, you pick up Blaine Gabbert for basically nothing. It's literally nothing. And then you look at it as now maybe you can, I don't know if you can lower the price tag of your backup quarterback. I think you can, but you have a different perspective in this, but I think you might be able to get him for 3 years, $10 million, 7 guaranteed of that, probably a higher guarantee than what you would expect, but 7 guaranteed of that. And now all of a sudden you've dropped $1 million or $1.5 million off of what you were paying Drew Stanton the last couple seasons. But that's the other thing, is that's the reality of the backup quarterback position as well, is that it's going to cost you money. And we know that the Cardinals have invested in it, and for good reason. Drew Stanton as a starter in Arizona has a winning record. Needless to get upset in terms of his on-field production, but he's got a winning record. And to that point, at this point, Blaine Gabbert's 500. So, he's a more than manageable and a good enough, like you said, good enough quarterback to come in and play 2-3 games in a pinch if the starter goes down. I guess we're going to find out if he's a guy that can play half a season or more and make a difference, or if the NFL starts to, quote unquote, figure it out. Because as you said, it seems like the NFL sure has figured him out in the second half of games, at least to this point, where the juxtaposition of his stats before the half and after the half. I mean, I don't think he's thrown a touch. No, he threw that bomb to Ron Brown, but 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions in the second half of games. 4 touchdowns and no interceptions in the first half of games. That's impressive, but it's also a very disproportionate and probably not something that can be continued or done consistently. Type of way of living as a quarterback.
Yeah, and there were definitely concerns. I mean, if you watch that game against Jacksonville, there were definitely moments of like a classic Gabbert. There were, even Pro Football Focus, there were 4 interceptable passes, and the truth is, he had the 1 interception. It was a bad throw. Bruce Arians said that was the right throw to make based on the coverage that he thought he saw, but he watched the receiver, he watched Chad Williams too long, and so the safety Barry Church knew what was coming. As you can see, they use film reviews, so they know what kind of thing is coming, and he just waited for that to happen. When in reality, he should see that safety, pump the guy, because he had a receiver down the field wide open. It would have been the same type of easy throw to make as he had with the touchdown to Ricky Seals-Jones and to Jerron Brown. He had some boneheaded. There were some where you're like, oh, he wasn't perfect. He got stripped trying to make a play. He wasn't careful with the ball. That's the one thing Bruce Arians has said multiple times about his mobility. That's fine. He likes to make plays outside of the pocket, but he's got to take care of the football. He got stripped. That Calais Campbell scored. He had throws that could have been intercepted. He threw the ball many times short of sticks on third down, and not only short of the sticks, you'll point out, is the fact that they were not, the ball placement isn't in such a way where the receiver could even do anything, where the guy who was catching the ball, the player couldn't even make a play once they made the catch. It was, catch the ball and then 0 yards beyond that. And even when he scrambled, one of the things that frustrated me is that even his scrambling wasn't always smart. Like even when he got out of the pocket and for a scramble, the angle that he took was a safer angle and a less productive angle that he would get when he was going out of bounds. So it looked like he runs for 20 and it goes for 4, as opposed to when you watch guys like Russell Wilson, any of these other, Alex Smith, even Aaron Rodgers, when they get out of the pocket and get free and they have the sideline open to them, they take the angle where they can gain the most yards almost always. They're trying to aim for the sticks to get out of bounds. Gabbert didn't do that, except for a couple times. There were 2 times he did, but it seemed like that was about half the time.
And it's one of those things where, when you watch Gabbert play, it almost feels like you can see when it's coming, not the bad per se, but when you can see the mistake coming. You're sitting there and going, oh, here it comes. Because there are times that he tries to do too much. And I think that is one of the issues that you have with him, is that you're still reeling him in, so to speak, as a player and saying, hey, we don't need you to be Carson Wentz. We just need you to put us in a position to win games. We need you not to make a boneheaded throw on was it even third down or was it still second down? That late throw to Chad Williams, that was the interception. They need him not to make that throw. And I get that he's trying to put his team in a position to win the game, and you can't fault him for that. But he has to still understand, and that's where his struggles have been, is it's better to in a way, so to speak, it's better to live another day than it is to make that throw. And then probably, let's be completely honest, any other quarterback or any other team outside of maybe the Houston Texans, of course, against the Cardinals, the Texans would have done it. But, they probably milk that clock away and kick a field goal and win that game. It just so happened that the Cardinals were playing against one of the quarterbacks in the NFL that is probably not as good as Blaine Gabbert. And so it worked out in their favor in this instance. And, the thing that you talked about with the throwing short of the sticks, like you said, if you're going to throw short of the sticks, you have to give guys a chance to make a play. And he did it on a couple of occasions. I don't want it to seem like this is just bagging on him, because it's not. But there were two plays in particular, third and shorts, where it was probably a design call out, where they wanted him to throw kind of a swing route or an out route in the flat to a running back. And he did, and he just didn't do it well. And again, that's where accuracy comes into play as well. And you kind of hit on it. He started to waver a little bit in his accuracy. He started out so hot in the first half. And then in the second half, I think at one point he had 8 incompletions in a row too, didn't he?
It might have been, I remember 6. I think there might have been 7, 8 perhaps was the case.
And so, it got to the point where it was, okay, now, you don't want to say it's a problem, but you're like, okay, this is becoming an issue where we really need him to not do that. And that's kind of where you're just continuing to you're continuing to enjoy, maybe the wrong word, but you're continuing to understand what has been the frustration of the Blaine Gabbert experience for so long, that there are plays that are left on the field that he missed, but then there's plays that he tried to make that he just can't make, maybe, and not skill-wise, because he's a very skilled player, but it's just execution-wise he's not able to make those, and then you set your team up in a bad way. And when we talked about this last week, and again, this is going to sound bad, but I really don't mean it in a bad way. The object of what Bruce Arians has been doing is very much to put the game not in Blaine Gabbert's hands at the end. And they did that for 3.5 quarters again. And I thought they did a really nice job of it. And I thought Blaine did a really nice job of it, where he wasn't forcing anything. Like you said, he made a great play when he stepped up and threw the ball down the field to Jerome Brown, escaping Calais Campbell. But, it's not like he was throwing, as you said, it wasn't like he was throwing into a tight window. It wasn't like he was making a throw that required a high level of accuracy plus velocity plus, whatever else. These were kind of open field throws that he was able to make, and he did a great job with it. And, it's not taking anything away from him. It's just the reality of it. And so when you look at it as a whole, I thought he played really well, and I thought he continued to show that they probably should invest in him as the backup quarterback for this team moving forward.
And coming up next on Rise to See Red, we're going to talk about more of the standout things. Not just Blaine Gabbert. We'll talk about some of the other players, both good and some concerns. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red.
Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.
We're back on Rise Up See Red. In addition to what stood out, there were, with Blaine Gabbert in particular, there were a number of things that you could find as positives. So you look at the team And you looked at the matchup. I leading up to this game, I said, there's no chance for the Cardinals. The Cardinals are going to get killed. You were the same way. You're the same way. Like, if you look at the matchup, you have this Cardinals offense that has struggled to score points, even on decent defense or even on bad defenses. Just an atrocious production on offense. And they're going up against the Jaguars, who are not only number one in total defense in terms of yards, but number one in scoring, number one against the pass, number one in turnovers, number one in sacks. And while the one area where they were middle of the road was against the rush, and you looked at the previous four games before that, during that time period, they were also number one in the league against the run. And then you look on the offensive side of the ball, the one thing that they do well is run the ball, the number one rushing attack in the league with Leonard Fournette leading the way. What did the Cardinals do? Not only did they run the ball effectively, they gained over 100 yards. Adrian Peterson finally had himself, a pedestrian 4 yards a carry, 20 carries for 79 yards. So they're able to keep the offense on time and on schedule. Blaine Gabbert threw for 257 yards. So they gained about 70 yards more than the Jaguars average that they normally allow. Blaine Gabbert threw but it ended up being about 70 yards more than the average. They only gave up the one sack when the Jaguars led the league in sacks. They did turn the ball over a couple of times, so that there was still the issue there. But then you look on the other side of the ball, and the number one rushing attack was limited. Now, Blake Bortles did a really good job of moving the ball and being elusive. He rushed 6 times for 62 yards, including a 28-yarder. But Leonard Fournette held to 25 yards on 12 carries. That's just over 2 yards a carry, and this was without Corey Peters, their best run defender. As a team, that was the most complete game. Yeah, I think you have to say it's clear. It was their best game of the season across the board.
Well, and I thought, again, from a coaching standpoint, I thought this was their best game as well. You saw them come out in a 4-3 defense. We haven't seen that at all.
No, and it's funny because they came out in the one play. I think they used it one other play the whole game. There was the opening play, and then there was one play, like in the fourth quarter, they lined up in that 4-3.
But you also saw probably the best game that Chandler Jones, maybe in his career. I mean,
incredible.
He was completely dominant. I think we would agree that we saw a dominant. We're seeing the return of. I want to say this careful because I don't want but I think we're seeing a slow return of Tyrann Mathieu as he as a playmaker. I still don't think he's fully healthy. I don't think he's fully able to do what he used to do, but I think you can see when he's used in a way that he has been lately, near the line of scrimmage, blitzing, those things, he's still highly effective, highly efficient, and he's a guy that can make plays. And now you have Budda Baker on the other side who kind of lessens the need for Tyrann Mathieu to do both and allows Mathieu to kind of be that freelancer that he's so good at being. And I think those things matter. I really do. I think these are important things, and we're seeing it from the defense. Dayon Buchanan went out in the first quarter, I believe it was. May have been the second quarter, but he went out early enough in the game where you had to have been worried it was going to have an impact on the game. And Josh Bynes came in and played really well. Olsen Pierre continues to play well. Robert Kimdiche had, two big plays in this game where he was part of the reason Chris Ivory fumbled that ball was because he got there so fast that it made Ivory stop, and then Bynes cleaned it up so well. And so when you look at it, you're starting to get production from guys that you needed production from, even without your best players at specific positions. Corey Peters has been out. Like you said, they lost Dayon Buchanan. He's clearly their best inside linebacker. No offense to Josh Bynes or Carlos Dansby, but I don't think anybody would argue with me that Buchanan's been their best linebacker. And it didn't matter because you had these guys step up, and you, as a unit, they were playing at a higher level than, as you said, the highest level we've seen all season. And that's what you saw. And if you want to take away one negative from this game, one minute negative, and it's not even really a negative, but if you want to be picky, I think the one thing you can take away from this game as bad, quote unquote, is that the one guy that we're still not seeing, or maybe seeing enough of, at least in my opinion, is Hassan Reddick. But you're getting so much from other guys. Kim DJ, like I said, Budda Baker, obviously, Tyrann Mathieu coming back into the fold, that I don't want to say that you're okay with not getting the production from Hassan Reddick. It just lessens the blow of maybe not getting the higher end production from Hassan Reddick.
Yeah, and you got Josh Bynes playing really a position he hadn't played, so he was very productive there. Chandler Jones, if you look at the stat line, he was incredible. He now tied the league lead in sacks. He found himself since the Cardinals record book. No one since Freddie Joe Nunn in 87-88 has had consecutive years of at least 11 sacks. Chandler's got it now. The record he ties the record for the sacks in the first 11 games of the season with 12. Simeon Rice did that in 1999. But it wasn't just that you were wowed by his performance on the field, the eye test. And then you look at the stat sheet: 2 sacks, 6 tackles, 5 for a loss. He broke up a pass. He also had 3 QB hits. He leads the league in sacks. He's tied there. He leads the league in QB hits. He leads the league in tackles for loss. That has been an incredible, incredible thing. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, it was an observation that I made. The Cardinals kind of fixed their receiver problem by not throwing to them. Blaine Gabbert completed 22 passes. 16 of them went to players that were not receivers. They had, It came out to 8 passes completed to tight ends. They had 8 passes completed to running backs. And then you had another 6 catches that came from receivers, and 3 of those were to Larry Fitzgerald. You got 1 from Jerron, 1 from JJ, and 1 from Chad Williams, who got some extended playing time for the first time in his career. We talked about the potential of, moving forward in 2018 with the offense being built kind of differently, where you have Fitz, you got David Johnson and Adrian Peterson, and then you've got tight ends that you can throw the ball to. We might, and then you don't need to rely on big production. It seems that Blaine Gabbert in 2 starts likes throwing the ball in the middle of the field. So those check down throws, the easy throws at the tight end that, Carson Palmer will make those throws, but he'd rather make other throws. He'd rather take chances down the field with bigger plays. We see Ricky Seals-Jones come up big. 4 catches for 72 yards. He scores a touchdown. Becomes the first rookie tight end to score touchdowns in consecutive games since Rob Awalt in 1987. And you get some people really excited about what
person, by the way. Jess is just seeing if you guys are paying attention.
I remember Wall Baywalt. Stop that. I remember him.
I was 1. I don't.
I remember Rob Awalt because Rob Awalt and Jay Novacek were on the same team in 1988, and were both promising talents. They ended up going to the Cowboys. Awalt was okay, and then Jay Novacek had himself a fabulous career. Cardinals had them both. And kind of the Jay Novacek curse, because they've never had a tight end of any sort of talent since then that's done much. But Ricky Seals-Jones, he was unforgettable. And the comments afterwards are interesting because he was flexed out as a wide receiver. He was flexed out wide lots. But they did have him in line, so they were they're keeping it honest. Okay, he is a tight end, and so they flex him out wide so he gets the better matchups. A couple of times they just didn't guard him. In the comments from Bruce Arians, and interesting is the fact that when he's on the field, it makes it easier for Blaine to make coverage reads because of what you see. Because if you see a corner lined up on Seals Jones, it's zone. And then you've got the man coverage when you have it. It's just a little bit easier, he said. He stepped up. Now, is he the future at tight end? No, he's part of the future. So that as long as he stays healthy and he keeps improving with his blocking, he can at least, with the tandem with him and Jermaine Gresham next year, should be pretty cool. Because they're not getting rid of Gresham because that contract makes it's written such you can't get rid of him next year. He has to be here 2 years or you're just burning money. And then Nicholas can go, but you can kind of build on that tight end position with Gresham and Seals Jones, and then you bring in a guy that's kind of just a more dedicated inline blocker, and you've suddenly got a player in Seals Jones who can have a higher ceiling than what Afani Moma did.
Yeah, and I think, we talked about this last week with Seals Jones. I think there's a comfort and a rapport there between Gabbert and Seals Jones. I honestly expected to see that a little more with Chad Williams this week. Maybe part of it was just that they didn't, like you said.
And Jacksonville's corners are fantastic. So
right, and he didn't throw the ball.
As bad as the receivers been, of course they were going to take it out of the game. Even, I didn't expect a big game from Fitz, and he didn't get one. 3 catches for 12 yards, but one of those was for -7. He should have not caught the ball. He should have just knocked it down. But Jalen Ramsey's fantastic. So Fitz wasn't going to get much against him. AJ Bouye, he's also really good. And plus the receivers just have been, kind of a hot mess. So you throw it to the running backs, you throw it to the tight ends, and then you move the ball down the field. Maybe that's that's how you do the offense with Blaine Gabbert. And for people like to say, Arians doesn't adjust his offense. Well, yes and no. He does adjust the offense, and he tailors things according to what his quarterback is comfortable with. He doesn't take as many shots down the field. Now, we saw Gabbert finally take some shots down the field on Sunday, but he doesn't. He's not as comfortable doing it as Palmer was. Remember, Palmer wasn't super comfortable doing it necessarily in this first year. It took about a year before he was all in. Stanton from the beginning was, but the quarterbacks take ownership, and Gabbert likes the lower risk throws, so he throws to the backs, he throws to the tight ends. He doesn't throw much in terms of outside the numbers, and it's effective. It's not elite, but it is effective.
And the thing is, and you kind of hit it on the head that they don't. I don't think they ask him to throw deep a lot. I think, like you said, he's comfortable not throwing deep, and so they're gonna use that until they make him start throwing deep. When you look at it in their 2 starts, both Stanton and Gabbert 2 starts. Stanton threw the ball down the field 20 yards or more 10 more times. That's a lot. And so that's just the game difference. I mean, that's the way that they both play differently. Some really interesting stats. I mean, when you look at it, when you look at Stanton and Gabbert, they both completed 44 passes, but Stanton's completion percentage is 13 points lower at 48.6 to Gabbert's 61.1. But Stanton has, I think it's about 50 or 60 more yards on the same amount of completions. And the reason is because he's pushing the ball down the field more. That's just how it works. And that's not a bad thing for Gabbert. And I've said this, I really applaud Bruce Arians if he's the one that's saying, don't worry about throwing it down the field. Keep us, as you said earlier, keep us on time, keep us in rhythm, keep us in a good position so we can make plays. Because let's be honest, that's not something we've seen from him. He's very much kind of set in his ways and worked for all these years, and by God, it's going to continue to work. And if it doesn't, we'll make it work. And and that's fine. That's Arians. That's who he is. That's who he wants to be, and that's how he's going to coach. And that's 100% okay. But to see him kind of come out and, I wouldn't say get away from it, but to come out and show a different side, to ask different things of his quarterback, I think that shows that he understands the talent difference he has. And I wouldn't say it's not that he's not as that he doesn't trust Gabbert as much as he does Stanton. I just think he knows that Gabbert's psyche is not like Stanton. Stanton can throw 3 interceptions and he still thinks he's going to make that next tight window throw with no problem. Gabbert in his career has not gotten to that point yet. So, what is Arians doing? He's saying, look, don't worry about it. Like, if you don't like the throw, just throw it away, or, go check down. And let's be honest, that's not something that we've ever seen under Bruce Arians. And it's kind of refreshing, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah, you see the tight ends get thrown the ball. It's kind of it's a novel thing. So concerns in terms of what we saw in that game. We even haven't even talked about Phil Dawson, the fact that he, after his last miss, I think he's hit 6 or 7 field goal kicks in a row, and it looks like he's finally got a rhythm. He hit all 4 of his kicks. They got progressively longer. I think it was just the sort of game that he needed to kind of get things right. And he hits the game winner, every single kick they needed. But in terms of concerns, you look at, obviously, the first, number one, the injury to Blaine Buchanan, which looked really serious, looked bad, like he re-injured, broke his ankle, because it's the same ankle that was there. But the report came out from Kent Summers, because the team, even the team, Bruce Arians said that they weren't sure how severe it was. It might be a day, might be a long time, might be serious. They had to send information to the surgeon who worked on it. Kent Summers said that, he reported that per source that it's going to be day to day for this week. Perhaps we'll be able to play against the Rams. Nonetheless, if you kind of want to read into things, the Cardinals signed Gabe Martin, a guy that they've had on the roster before at inside linebacker. So that tells you that they aren't 100%. They don't believe 100% that Dion's going to be available. So they wanted to make sure that they have some depth there behind Dansby and Josh Bine. So Dion Buchanan, that's a concern, especially since he really is there. He's kind of the key there in the middle and athletically. It was also the one thing that bothered me is how Blake Bortles was able to use his legs. Now, I know he's an athletic guy, and maybe it almost felt like that they game planned for everything except that.
And you talked about it. This is a talent is probably not the right word, but this is a good smash mouth type of offense. And the Jacksonville Jaguars that the Cardinals were able to shut down, their receivers are complete. I mean, they make the Cardinals receivers look like 2015 again. What they have in the game, 4 drops on passes, and so it's not exactly the 99 Rams, but they still have some talent, and they did, like you said, they shut down everything. And it's been since, I think it's 91 or 92, I'll have to go back and look, since the Cardinals have had a shutout in a game. So in reality, it was as close as they're going to get to a shutout, because they just don't shut teams out. Like, it just doesn't happen. It's really hard in the NFL to shut a team out for 4 quarters. And so I think when you look at it from that perspective, I think they did a really nice job. I think that they kept the game in control. And then kind of later in the game, and you saw it kind of start right before half when I think it was Chandler Jones got the sack and then was celebrating, and then they were able to advance the ball and get into field goal range for Josh Lambo, who kicked the field goal. And that's one of those plays you go, ugh, really? Like, is this going to come back and bite them? And it didn't. To an extent, it didn't. I mean, this game was still closer than we expected, but it didn't. But when you look at that, there's still inconsistencies within the team, and it would make sense because, you know, we've talked about this. They're not a dominant defense by any means. They're not a dominant team by any means. If they were, you know, they wouldn't be sitting at whatever they're, you know, at the 5-6, lamenting a loss to Tom Savage at this point. Like, they would be a team that's closer to the playoffs. They wouldn't be, you know, the 12 seed because of tiebreakers and strength of schedule. They'd be more like the 8 seed and things of that nature. And so, I think if you temper your expectations a little bit, which sucks as a fan, because you want to be able to cheer for a team that has a chance to win it all. But if you temper your expectations, go, okay, this team is good enough to compete with Jacksonville and put themselves in a position to win the game, and they just did. Because like you said, I mean, they let Blake Bortles take advantage of them with his legs. He was able to, you know, run in touchdowns, but he also had several other long runs throughout the game to set up plays. You know, they basically took away the deep ball. They made Jacksonville catch things in front, and they tackled pretty well. But again, the Cardinals were up 16-3 and were outscored 21-11 after that point. So if not for a fast start, if not for, you know, the defense causing a fumble and giving the Cardinals a short field for an early Phil Dawson field goal, you know, this could be a game where we're talking again about another fourth quarter collapse. The difference this time was, and I'll say it again, was that one, I think they played a bad quarterback, but two, their defense made plays when they needed them to.
Correct. Coming up next on Rise Up See Red, let's talk about kind of the season moving forward, because this win gave the team a little bit of life, gives fans a little bit of life as to expectations, and we'll look ahead to the Rams game coming up this weekend. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red.
Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. Subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.
We're back on Rise Up See Red. What are we to think of this season now? We sort of gave the death sentence to the team after their loss to the Rams, and more so against the Texans. You know, they're on life support at this point, but something happens. And now with this win, what is there to think? Because I look at you look at the schedule now. Aside from the game this week against the Rams, the rest of the schedule is not that difficult overall. So Tennessee comes into town next weekend. They travel to Washington. They come back home for the Giants, and then they travel to Seattle. If you look outside the Rams game this weekend, the rest of those games are quite winnable. So now they finally put together a win against a good team. It makes you want to think. Well, for me, the reaction was, "Wow, what a fun win!" But then after the win, I think to myself, and I just get mad. I'm frustrated at how that win just makes this season even more frustrating, because the game against Seattle they should have won. Truthfully, they should have won in Detroit with the way they started that game. And they should have beaten the Texans. So even one of those games, you're sitting at 6-5, you're a game out of the playoffs, and you're sitting there wondering, just thinking, lamenting the fact that despite without your starting quarterback, without your starting running back, who's a star, without your left tackle, and without your left guard, without your leading pass rusher from a year ago, and now without your leading tackler, they should be right in the mix of the postseason. But now you look at this. They get the win. They're 5-6, and you think, what if they can win? What if they can beat the Rams and have that revenge game? Even their record to 6-6, they're close the gap in the division, and the schedule coming up, you think, oh, they're going to get our hopes up, aren't they? They're going to win this week, and they're going to get our all hopes up, and there's going to be something down the line they're going to screw up and then just ruin it again. That's kind of the feeling I have. But go ahead and get me sucked in, guys, because that's what I do with the Cardinals. I get sucked in every single time that there's a possibility.
Well, and I think I think you're accurate in your assessment and what could happen. Is this team good enough to win, 5 games in a row and get to 10-6, and really 6 games in a row when you count the game they already won? Probably not. If we're just being honest, they're probably
not. But
when you look at their schedule, you can't definitively tell me outside of this Los Angeles Rams game that any of these teams are good on a week-to-week basis. After the Rams game, they have a really up and down Titans team and
a Washington team that's basically the same thing as the Cardinals.
Right. The only difference with Washington is that they have a quarterback that can win them games. That's the one difference. When you look at New York, they're a complete dumpster fire at this point.
They'll be facing Geno Smith or Davis Webb. That you lose to one of them, then you don't deserve deserve anything. So
right, exactly. You lose to one of those teams, okay. It's over, it's done with as is. Like there's no reason to get excited anymore. But when you look at it, I said this in my article today about the draft and the draft position, and I broke down the schedule, and I said I honestly wouldn't be shocked if they went 5-0 or if they went 0-5. Because that's what this team has been this year is just a complete and utter unknown where you from week to week you really don't know what you're getting, and because of that, in the end you end up just hoping that it's competitive every week, and that you just don't get the Cardinals that showed up. That's really where we're at now, right? It's like just give me a good game. Don't be the team that got their brains beat out across the ocean, and I guess I'll be happy. Like I prefer that you win, but I guess I'll be happy if you make it look good. And don't lose to Tom Savage. So basically, don't lose to Davis Webb, right? Especially at home. Like I don't think they would have lost if they were at home, but if they would have, I guess we probably could have just done the ceremony that day. But
so now, so we've got to see.
I think this week will really dictate it overall. Is what I'm trying to say. Like I think if they win this week, you can start to get semi-excited again. It may be too little too late, but I think you can start to get excited again. But if they lay another egg, or let's be honest, if the Rams are just a better team, which they are, and the Cardinals can't keep up and compete, then it's not time to lay them to rest. But I think you and I were accurate in what we said 5 weeks ago, that this was a 7-win team without Carson Palmer.
And they're back on track. After the loss last week, you're like, wait, can they win 7 wins? Now you look at the schedule, like, yeah, they probably can get 7 wins. They probably can get 7 wins, and they might get 8 wins. And they're between a 7 and a 9 win team. And if they get hot, if they get, there's hope. There's hope. So hope is not dead. We gave them their death sentence, but the appeal is in, and the judge is considering it. Let's look ahead to the Rams. What is there to like more this time around. Now, I haven't looked. What is this? Do you remember what the status is for Roberts? I didn't realize that he missed the last game. Is he hurt again? Is he going to miss this game too?
Who, Robert Quinn?
Robert Woods.
Robert Woods. Oh, I'm not sure. Look.
I was on a podcast today and I didn't realize that, but I that would change things, because the one thing about for me, like we mentioned last time, the one thing about the Rams that worries me the most, it's not the running game, it's not Todd Gurley, it's not their defense, it's their ability to make plays in the passing game, because they have so many weapons, and they can do it in a number of ways, whether it's Todd Gurley as a pass catcher, because that middle of the field that's been the bugaboo for the Cardinals all year. You can win against the Cardinals in the slot. You can win against the Cardinals with the tight ends and running backs. You're not winning with your receivers most of the time on the outside. Not since Tramon Williams came in and really stabilized that second corner position.
And it sounds like he'll likely miss this week, but because it said a couple weeks and he's only missed one game, so that could be a big bonus for the Cardinals. When you look at this game, though, it's going to come down to who shows up for the Cardinals in terms of is this a game where you get a solid output from the offensive line, because I think that's something that you and I didn't cover nearly enough in this episode, but there was so much to get through. But how good the offensive line was in this episode, and then when you look at it, or in this game, excuse me, when you look at it from that perspective, that was their best performance as an offensive line, probably of the season, and it gave them a really nice chance to win the game, and they took advantage of it. The other thing is, and now you get another, probably not quite as talented, but they definitely have the best defensive lineman in the NFL, and Aaron Donald. So can you contain him, and can Blaine Gabbert continue to play at a relatively high level in terms of not making mistakes, turning the ball over, and those things. Because let's face it, the one thing we haven't had to see yet early is the Cardinals have to play from behind with Blaine Gabbert. Now, we saw it in the fourth quarter of the Texans game, and that's when 2 interceptions occurred. But we haven't seen one of those games where the Cardinals get down, 10-0 or 14-0 in the first quarter, and then Blaine Gabbert's got to throw his way out of it. And quite frankly, let's not start this week. I think that's the big thing, is if you can continue to put the game in other players' hands and let Gabbert kind of be the guide, if you will, to get them to where they want to go. Because through a couple games, he's done a nice job of that.
He has. And then, they've been inconsistent against the run. Todd Gurley, who's having a fantastic year, if they are able to stop Leonard Fournette, let's do the same. Let's have them do the same against the Rams. And then here's the other part. Run the ball effectively. They didn't need a 139 yard. They didn't need the 157 yard performance from Adrian Peterson. 20 carries for 79 yards. We'll take that, because it does just enough to open up the offense.
Right, exactly. And that's what they need from him, and that's what they need moving into this kind of final stretch of the season, if they can get it, allowing the team to be multifaceted instead of having, like I said, having to rely on Blaine Gabbert. Because once you do that, you put yourself in a position where you're asking a guy to do something that he really hasn't done in his career. Now, he's been good enough through 2 weeks, and I think that's unexpected. And I think, honestly, if it continues, you just have to hope that the team continues to respond for him, and that they continue not to put too much on him. And I think they can do that. But, this is going to be another tough test, and we'll see how they respond. I'm actually looking forward to this game more than I was 2 weeks ago because of the performance. But, to be completely honest, the Rams are a completely different animal than the Jaguars, in the fact that they win offensive. And so are the Cardinals good enough to stop them consistently? And then, because I'm going to be honest with you, if this game gets into a shootout, I don't like.
There's no way. There's no way.
I don't like the Cardinals' chances. But if you can keep this game under 20, I think there's a shot that this could be a game where the Cardinals pull off a second, quote unquote upset at home, and that's what you want.
And think of that. What would happen these last few weeks if Blaine Gabbert is the player to lead the Cardinals to the postseason? Now, there's not going to be any postseason run, but imagine, considering where the Cardinals were, just how bizarro it will be in the NFL if Blaine Gabbert leads the Cardinals to the playoffs. Just leave that there for you. If the Cardinals get hot, it's going to be Blaine Gabbert leading them. But we'll be back next week. Now that'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. We talked about a really impressive win. We talked about what's coming up on the schedule. Hopefully, when we come back next week, they're back even at 500 at 6-6 with even more life and a little more momentum and an easy schedule coming up down the stretch. On behalf of you can find us, of course, all over the place. You can find us on iTunes. Look us up on iTunes. Subscribe to us. And if you do subscribe to us, leave us a wonderful rating. We'd really appreciate that. You can find us on Google Play, on Stitcher Radio, Blog Talk Radio, Audio Boom, on Seth's side, RevengeOfTheBirds.com, on my side, CardsWire.com. We're on Twitter, Rise Up Sea Red, and also on Facebook, Rise Up Sea Red. On behalf of this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Go Cardinals, Rise Up Sea Red, and hopefully we come back next week with another win. Go Cardinals.
Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.